The global economic situation in recent years has led us to spend much more time on this channel discussing the recent national economic crisis than interesting economic ideas or how great Norway is. Economists tend to be a pessimistic bunch because on YouTube and in the real world, most people are primarily interested in knowing what's going wrong. However, there are good reasons to be optimistic. Global production is now significantly higher than before the pandemic outbreak in late 2019, and it is expected that the world will surpass a GDP of $100 trillion either this year or possibly even last year for the first time. This means the world is producing 3 times as many goods as it did at the turn of the millennium 23 years ago. During this time, 2 billion people have been added to the planet, which, while substantial, represents only a 30% increase. This means that the average person out there in this vast world is economically twice as well off as a generation ago. While this prosperity is not evenly distributed, and isolated economic collapses are occurring in various individual economies, the overall life for the average citizen today is better than ever before. However, despite the global economy being in better shape than ever, there is a trend emerging where more and more individual economies are experiencing isolated collapses, threatening the well-being of hundreds of millions of people. This trend is particularly evident in developing countries. This year, we have already had to consider economies like Lebanon, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan that have almost completely collapsed. There are at least a dozen other countries in the world at different stages of a similar breakdown. The main reason economic collapses occur more frequently in developing countries rather than underdeveloped or advanced economies is that advanced economies have many advantages. Underdeveloped economies exist in a state of constant economic failure, with much of their workforce engaged in informal, non-market-dependent activities. This situation, while challenging, means that a 20% decline in economic output in a year would not impact the quality of life for the average citizen as severely as in an economy heavily reliant on the market. On the other hand, advanced economies enjoy numerous advantages that make a complete collapse rare. They often host industries that offer valuable goods and services worldwide, providing a steady source of foreign income. Advanced economies also have a high standard of living, attracting skilled workers globally, allowing them to address labor shortages quickly. They can borrow money at lower interest rates, and their populations, on average, are wealthier, making it easier to raise funds domestically. These advantages, however, do not guarantee immunity to economic shocks. Developing countries face challenges due to their dependency on external factors, such as trade slowdowns or capital outflows, leading to economic downturns. The issue is compounded by the fact that these countries often need to offer higher interest rates on their bonds to attract investors, putting them at a disadvantage compared to developed nations. The role of government in facilitating economic development is crucial, primarily through the provision of infrastructure. Strong, efficient governments are essential for creating an environment conducive to industrial growth. Infrastructure, including ports, airports, roads, telecommunications, education, and healthcare, plays a pivotal role in economic competitiveness. While some of these facilities can be privatized, governments must initially invest in their development. Successful infrastructure spending should generate enough economic growth to repay the incurred debts. However, many governments in the real world cannot simply print money to address these challenges, especially when large international corporations are involved, refusing payments in the currency of a developing country. Developed economies already have much of their infrastructure in place, making reinvestment and maintenance more affordable and less risky than constructing facilities from scratch. Furthermore, advanced economies benefit from lower interest rates, allowing them to borrow at more favorable terms. This makes it feasible for them to invest in projects that could stimulate high economic growth, whereas developing countries often struggle to find such economically viable projects. In the last decade, China's Belt and Road Initiative was a significant source of foreign investment in developing countries, offering cheap loans for infrastructure projects. However, this came with the condition that China retained control over what was built, often favoring infrastructure that enhanced trade with China. As China shifted from a net capital provider to a net capital receiver, developing countries faced increasing challenges in repaying their debts. The power of representative government, as highlighted by Nobel laureates Daron Acemoglu and James Robinson, is instrumental in fostering strong economic performance. In democracies, decisions must align with the will of the people, and poor decisions increase the likelihood of being voted out in the next election. This motivates governments to provide services that not only keep citizens satisfied but also empower them to build industries and opportunities for more potential voters. While economic shocks, such as the global pandemic, play a role in economic collapses, negotiations between countries, debt restructuring, and assistance from international organizations aim to prevent these crises from spreading to other nations. Despite the potential positive impact of global changes, there is a chance of experiencing more national economic crises in the coming years as the world emerges from a tumultuous period. The global economic conditions are beyond the control of any single country, particularly small developing nations. They cannot dictate China's foreign policy or central bank interest rate decisions. However, they can carefully select which projects to undertake and which to reject, although this is a challenging task. In conclusion, the fundamental reasons for the failure, especially of developing countries, are complex. While factors like poor economic management, excessive investments, and corruption can weaken economies, they do not automatically lead to collapse. Economic collapses require a spark, which can come in the form of economic shocks. The recent global pandemic and the subsequent economic responses can be seen as such a shock. However, the negotiation processes, international support, and restructuring efforts indicate that nations are actively working to prevent these shocks from causing widespread economic collapses.